The thing I want to talk about first, though, is the new Master Duel Forbidden and Limited List update. That one's actually quite interesting. Now, I have already seen it because it happened, like, I think 2 days ago. So it's not going to be a blind react. You don't have to go and scroll and slowly pretend like I don't know what's happening. So let's just go over it. Let's just recap the changes and then talk about it a little bit. Here it is. We have Forbidden Calamity. Phenomenal ban, or we all know about that. Like, we all know, like, this is one of the things that I really want to happen in the TCG as well. But here we go, we got it in Master Duel. I'm not entirely sure what the exact like cause for them is to do it right now, because I don't know if many decks are doing it at the moment. Maybe it's a preparation for Centurion release at some point in the foreseeable future. I don't know exactly when we get those. Maybe it's because people have been doing it a lot with Horus cards, Horus Naturia. Yeah, maybe. Honestly, I don't care what their reason is to do it exactly now, because I'm happy it happened. So I'm not gonna ask these questions. I don't really care. I'm just happy it happened. And then we have Wanted and Snake Eye Ash Limited. Now I wanna talk about the rest of the ban list real quick, and then come back to this and give you guys my opinion on this, because there's a lot of things that are good about this, and there are some things that are bad about this. Which I've already touched on in my latest, like when we played the Limit 1 festival, we talked about this already a little bit. Because I'm not a fan of consistency hits, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. We have cards to be semi-limited, Sprite Jet. I think this is a good decision. I think Sprites are in a pretty rough spot in Master Duel right now, even though they do have Elf still. I think 2 blue, 2 jet is kind of like a sweet spot for Sprite cards if they want them to be somewhat viable but not too powerful. I think with Elf legal, you got to be careful what you do with Sprite cards, because the TCG basically shows that even in a format without Maxi, as long as Elf is banned, the Sprite cards basically can be at 3. Right? Because the Sprite cards in the TCG are like fine, you know, sometimes you play them, but like not very often, and the power level is okay. But as long as Sprite Elf is legal, I think it's dangerous to put them any higher than that. However, I do think with 1 jet the deck felt a little bit too bad, right? And I think 2 jet is kind of like where it's at. I think this is like, now it's like reasonable to play certain Sprite variations again, even though 1 beaver is still pretty bad. Right, so can't really play the nimble package to a great extent. But yeah, I agree with this one. I think it's fine. And then we have a bunch of things that go back to 3, and there's a couple bangers here. We got Engage. That's now unlimited in every single format, and I do think that so far it has proven that in every single format, Engage can be at 3 without a problem, right? Like, it's like people are trying to play it in the TCG right now, and some to like moderate success, especially when you play like a Sky Striker engine in other decks. But I do think that sort of is fine nowadays, right? Like, I think it's okay. I think it's a fine engine. I think having to go through the motions to put 3 spells in the graveyard to then get a +1 is reasonable. And I think it's a good change. I'm looking forward to it, especially because, you know, I like this Sky Striker engine in a bunch of decks. I think it's fun. Monkey Board back to 3 is interesting because this is the first format out of the 3. As you can see on the screen, it's at 1 in the TCG, it's at 1 in the OCG. So Master Duel is the first format to put this card to 3. Conceptually, I don't have an issue with this at all. But you guys know that I don't really like Pendulum, so I don't have strong feelings about this. Like, I'm mostly just hoping that this doesn't really make Pendulum combo decks viable, but at the same time, I can't really argue against the fact that Pendulum decks could need some help. So here we are. Right over Ramesir is back to 3. Master Duel. Okay, now I'm getting stuff confused. The OCG has Griffin Rider banned, but Master Duel doesn't, right? Master Duel still has Griffin. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct. Okay. And Enchantress is currently at 1 or 2. It's at 2. Okay, so you basically have the full adventure package minus 1 Enchantress, right? I think this is okay, even though similar to Pendulum, I was never a huge fan of the formats where people played like adventure combo piles, right? It's not my favorite type of format for these kind of decks to exist. At the same time, these cards are already at full power in the TCG as well, and like we're just not really seeing anyone do anything with it. And I feel like at this point, whenever you're playing an adventure deck, you are playing a pretty wacky deck in order to, like, you get an Omni Negate, but you have to play a bunch of bricks, and you have to play a deck that doesn't use, you know, a lot of the very strong normal summons that we have. So you it's kind of like an okay payoff, I feel like, at this point in time. Like, and once again, this is something that in 2022 I wouldn't have thought that we would ever get here, you know, like, because what this made me remember is that in 2022 everyone on every single banlist discussion or banlist prediction was putting the adventure cards on their like stuff, right? Everyone was like, yeah, this stuff needs to get limited or semi-limited or ban Griffin or whatever. And the TCG just never did any of that. Like, they never hit adventure ever, which at the time people criticized it, and I'm sure I criticized it at some point as well, probably. But then looking back at it, I feel like it was an okay decision to just leave it be, right? Just leave the cards there, and at this point I feel like it's fine. So yeah, maybe the whole adventure, like Herman is saying in the chat, maybe the whole adventure thingy was just more of a problem of other cards, right? Like Halka Fibrax or whatever, right? Like there was, I feel like there were other cards that this facilitated that were problematic, and I think right now it's fine. Steam the Cloak, I'm also completely fine with. It's a good card. It might see play at some point. I do like Steam the Cloak. But I don't think it's a problem, and it's at 3 in every single format now, and I think that's okay. So overall, I think this is a good list. Let's be real. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the specific hits to Snake Eyes, but in general, what this list does is ban Calamity, which is a toxic card, hit Snake Eye, which is realistically the deck that needs to get hit in Master Duel the most. And it unlimits a bunch of cards that deserve to be unlimited, right? And so I think that's a good list. That's a W, especially compared to some of the recent ones that we've gotten. I like it, right? Especially because they're not doing some weird ass hits to like random cards that are because they're not ultra rare or something. No, they're hitting like the problem cards, right? Calamity, the ultra rare, banned. Wanted, the ultra rare, limited, right? Like actually hitting what matters instead of hitting like weird commons or rares or supers or whatever, right? Like let's ban Snake Eye Birch, you know? Anyways, if you've seen my my most recent YouTube video about the Limit 1 festival, in that video I talk about like why I think consistency hits are not good for the game, and I wanted to, like, even though we've had this discussion on stream a couple times, we haven't had it. I haven't had it in a form where it was like ready to go on YouTube, right? And so I wanted to reiterate over that real quick just to get my point out there, right? And in general, this is going to be a more general discussion. I'm going to get to how I think about these two particular hits in regards to that topic, but in general, my personal opinion is that consistency hits are not good for the game, because what I mean by a consistency hit, by the way, just for context, just so we're all on the same page, is when you limit or semi-limit something that doesn't change the way a combo plays out, it just changes how often you can do the combo. Like for example, if you have a deck that has, I don't know, 6 starter cards, and you like limit one of them, like what they've been doing with Super Heavy Samurai, for example. It's like, okay, we're putting the crossbow or whatever it's called, right, the Soul Piercer, we're putting it to 2, or maybe like, I don't know if they actually did that, but like in theory, if you put Vakaushi to 2 or something like that, right, that's a consistency hit, because it doesn't change at all how the deck plays. It just changes, it slightly changes the statistics in how often you open those cards. Like they put, what is it, wagon? They put wagon to 2. That sort of stuff, right? It changes nothing, legitimately nothing about the super heavy samurai combo, right? The line is the exact same. If you open one of those cards, you can do the exact same stupid stuff, but you can just do it slightly less often, which from a statistical standpoint, it does achieve something, right? Because it makes the deck maybe go from a, like, I don't know, 55% win rate to like a 53% win rate, because it has a slightly increased chance of bricking, right? Made up numbers, but you get the point. So in that sense, it does weaken a deck, right? And when a deck deserves to be weakened, that is one way you could do it. However, I would argue that from a gameplay perspective, these sort of hits are not great for the game, because it creates frustration in 2 different scenarios. Either someone is gonna still open the combo and then do the exact same thing, and then as the opponent you sit there and you're like, well, what was this banlist change for? Like, this feels the same, this is unbeatable, I can't do anything about this. Like, why was that the change, right? Why would they still opened combo, they still did the exact same unfair thing that we all agree is a problem. Why am I still losing to it, even though they were supposed to address it on the ban list, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that, if they brick with super heavy samurai now, right, because they didn't draw that starter, they do nothing, right? And that also doesn't feel great. That's also not very like cool gameplay wise, right? And so you're making it so that either your deck still does the exact same thing or nothing at all, right? And this is why in general I don't like consistency hits. You guys can let me know in the comments down below what you think of these in general. I think that they have a purpose. They do achieve something, because they lower a deck's win rate, and if you do enough of them, then a deck becomes unplayable. So they do something. I'm not saying they don't do anything. I'm just saying they don't feel great, and there's a better way of doing it. My better way, what I'm proposing is a better way of doing it, is to simply change how a deck plays. And what I mean by that is that, for example, if we look at Snake Eyes right now, and we're going to talk about the specific hits that they made and why they're not as bad, actually. All this might sound like I don't hate these, I hate these hits, but I don't. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But for example, if you, let's say you limited Diabell Star, right? That would mostly be a consistency / extender hit. Or like, let's say you semi-limited Bonfire or whatever, right? Those were hits. Those would be hits that weaken the Snake Eye decks, because they play those cards at 3 copies for a reason, obviously, right? However, it doesn't really change the way the combo plays out. Now, a way you could change the way the combo plays out is, for example, you could ban Snake Eye Oak. You could ban Divine Temple. You could ban Flamberge Dragon. All those things. You could ban original Sinful Spoils, right? All those things would be... You would take 1 card out of the Snake Eye deck if you banned original Sinful Spoils, for example, right? But it completely changes the entire landscape of the deck, right? Because now Diabell Star can't get you Snake Eye Ash anymore, and so on and so forth. It's like very little input, very little thing that changes, but it completely changes the way the deck plays, right? And those are the sort of hits that I'm a fan of, right? Because then your deck is still consistent, but maybe it's just weaker, and then we see if that's still playable, and then maybe we could play Snake Eyes in a more balanced form, right? That would be my ideal. Now, in this particular instance, both Snake Eye Ash and Wanted, because Snake Eyes is such a powerful deck, these cards have multiple purposes, right? On the very surface level, these are consistency hits, right? Because both Wanted and Snake Eye Ash are starter cards for the Snake Eye deck, right? But that's just because literally every single card in Snake Eye is a starter card, except for like Flamberge and Oak. So yes, these are consistency hits partially, right? Because opening Snake Eye Ash, opening Wanted is a way to start the Snake Eye combo, and so with these hits, you are now slightly more likely to brick. And one bad thing about these hits is that a lot of the time, in a vacuum, if you don't get interrupted, if you open one of these cards, or if you open a Snake Eye starter, you can still do the same combo, right? Because none of the combos involved multiple copies of Snake Eye Ash or multiple copies of Wanted, right? Like if you normal summon Snake Eye Ash and it resolves, then you can do the exact same thing as you could before, right? And that's not great. However, there's a couple of things that are good about these, right? Because another way how I think limiting or semi-limiting a card can be very nice is when it's about like when it changes something to the resource loop of a deck, right? When it's like, okay, maybe your first turn combo is the same, but maybe your grind game becomes significantly weaker because you run out of those cards faster, right? So even though the deck makes the same board on turn 1, maybe it's easier to deal with because if you can somewhat break it, they might not have great follow-up anymore, right? Which in the case of Snake Eye Ash and Wanted is somewhat applicable. Like you running out of Snake Eye Ash can happen more often now, right? Because you're always going to use one on turn 1, so you're not going to have another one in the deck. You cannot go, for example, one thing you would often do is you would go Flamberge on the opponent's turn to bring back Snake Eye Ash from the graveyard, and then what you could do is you could grab another Snake Eye Ash from the deck to have a normal summon on the next turn, right? And that is not something you can do anymore. At the same time, you can also not really grab another Oak because you don't play multiple Oaks unless you do that now. Maybe you play 2 Oaks now, whatever. Another thing you also can't do is on the second turn, you cannot original Sinful Spoil into another copy of Snake Eye Ash, for example. That does not work well. So that's fine. It's a fine hit to Snake Eye Ash. But my favorite part about limiting Snake Eye Ash, and I've said this in the past, Snake Eye Ash is still very easily searchable, right? Diabellstar or Wanted into original Sinful Spoil can still get you Snake Eye Ash. Bonfire can still get you Snake Eye Ash. Poplar into original into Snake Eye Ash still gets you there, right? There's still plenty of ways to find Snake Eye Ash. 1-for-1 as well, yeah. The thing is, Snake Eye Ash was always at the very best when you hard drew it. When you drew Snake Eye Ash, it was the most powerful because all those other cards are multi-purpose. Wanted, Diabellstar, and Bonfire are both starters and extenders. And if you force your opponent to use a quote-unquote extender as a starter, that means that they are going to be easier to interrupt because they have less possible extenders. For example, if your opponent normal summons Snake Eye Ash and you would decide to use Infinite Impermanence on it, the possible cards your opponent can have to play through it are original Sinful Spoils, Diabellstar, Wanted, Bonfire. All those cards they can just have in hand and keep playing, right? If your opponent starts or has to start with a Diabellstar to get to the Snake Eye Ash, then the possible ways that the opponent can continue are much fewer, right? Because it eliminates all those possibilities, right? The same is true about Bonfire. If your opponent has to start with a Bonfire on Snake Eye Ash, they can't simply use that Bonfire as an extender to push through any hand trap, right? And so, while yes, the Snake Eye deck will still be able to combo relatively consistently, because what is it? You still have like potentially like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 starter cards. You can still combo, but your combos are going to be much less resilient. They're going to be much less resilient because most likely you're not going to open your one of Snake Eye Ash that often. Most likely you're going to have to use one of your ways that you would normally use to extend as a way to find your Snake Eye Ash to begin with, right? And another big deal is that this is less of a deal for pure Snake Eyes, but even there it matters a little bit. It's very important for like hybrid Snake Eye decks. If you have to use Diabellstar, which is in theory your most common starter now, right? Well, I mean, it always was, but like you have 1 Wanted and 3 Diabellstars making for 4 copies of it. If you have to use your original Sinful Spoil to get to Snake Eye Ash, you cannot use that original Sinful Spoil to bridge into a secondary engine, right? You can't use original to grab Onyx, which, well, that's more of a thing in the TCG yet, but it's going to be in Master Duel at some point. You can't use original Sinful Spoil to grab Jet Synchron to go into your Formula Baron plays. You can't use your original Sinful Spoil to go into Hydrant, right? So if you're forced to use Diabellstar to start your combo, that is really, really not really bad, but it's like it has a lot of disadvantages over just opening Snake Eye Ash, right? Because one, you don't have that Diabellstar as an extender, and two, you don't have the option to go original into whichever level 1 fire you want to, right? And that's a big deal. So even though these are consistency hits, I think these are the kind of consistency hits that I like, because they have more impact beyond the just, well, they have less starters now. It's a lot deeper than that. And then Wanted in general, I don't like I don't like Wanted. I get frustrated every time my opponent opens Wanted, because it's just like opening Diabellstar but draws you a card. So it's like, Diabellstar is already a good card. Why is this card a better card that's essentially the same card but also draws an extra card for no real reason? Which is annoying to me. I think that's yeah. I still it's still gonna be frustrating whenever they draw that one copy, you know. That's another thing, right? Sometimes they're gonna have Wanted and it's gonna be frustrating, but it is what it is. It's also worth noting that if you open Wanted, the fact that you get to also not only draw a card but also recycle the original is a big deal too, right? Because now the amount of times you can use original in a game is also lower, because you can only recycle it once with the Wanted, and then it's done. Even though with one Snake Eye Ash, I don't know how often you want to use an original Sinful Spoils anyways, but yeah. All together, there were two things I wanted to get across with this discussion. The first thing was why in general I am skeptical about consistency hits. You guys can let me know what you thought of that. If you're watching on YouTube, obviously leave a comment and let me know what you think of this entire topic. But more so, also the reason why in this particular instance it's like it's a little different, right? Because yes, these are consistency hits, but not only. They have they go a little bit deeper, and I'm as far as my personal opinion goes on whether this is sufficient or not, I am not sure if this is enough. I think Snake Eyes is still going to be something that people play. It's a little bit more high rolly now, because we are getting into that sort of territory where the deck starts becoming a little inconsistent, right? And it starts being a little weak to hand traps, because you don't have like infinite normal summons and infinite extenders anymore. But still, it's a force to be reckoned with. And that is scary to an extent. And there's like other ways to do it in the foreseeable future. You know, there's like whenever we get, for example, the Melodious cards, they would fix a lot of these issues, right? Like the Melodious cards are a way to start your Snake Eye combo with. They give you more normal summons again and all that kind of stuff, right? Like Ostinato is a starter and like all this kind of stuff, right? So I don't think this is the end of Snake Eyes, but it is, I think, still a good ban list and a solid start, right? Especially when I'm looking at it compared to the past one or two ban lists in Master Duel that really I wasn't a big fan of. This one I think is a lot better. But yeah. Rescue Ace was proving to be a contender for best deck. I think this puts it as the best. I mean, yeah, I think Rescue Ace is probably the deck that cares the least about losing Snake Eye Ash. Because there were already versions that didn't even play it, right? I'm not sure if that's true, actually. But like some versions only played Poplar and Diabellstar and Bonfire, right? You could still play it, because it still is a fine normal summon, right? But you don't have to. Yeah. So for Rescue Ace, this doesn't matter that much. But at the same time, I have less of an issue with Rescue Ace than I have with Snake Eye, but it might prove to be a problem at some point. Definitely could be, but we'll see. I'm surprised they didn't touch Sprite Elf. Dude, people are surprised about that since like 2 years. Since we have Lifter at 3, Ash is not needed. Lifter is a better normal summon. Yeah, I guess. It's I don't think it's unlikely that Rescue Ace is the best deck now. The more I think about it, it's definitely possible that Rescue Ace is the deck to beat at this point in time.